Thank you, Presiding Officer. One of the many positive aspects of the campaign was the sheer level of engagement. Members of our communities engaged at all levels, whether it be social media, public meetings or the big television debates. People were extremely interested in this debate. And who wouldn't be interested in the biggest debate, most important debate Scotland has ever had? It was a busy campaign, regardless of whether you were yes or no. I'm quite sure that the energy drink sales probably went through the roof with many campaigners all the time, although I'm currently trying to get many members of Team Paisley off of that kind of addiction almost at this stage. But I'm glad to say that the people of Paisley voted yes. They are a yes town. Traditional working-class areas wanted independence for Scotland. Glenbar, Foxbar, Paisley's East End and Fergusley Park, traditionally low turnout numbers, came out in massive numbers to vote for this type of radical change. And that's the type of engagement that we must embrace as politicians. We must ensure that these people still feel powerful and still want to actually engage, because they felt their vote would make a difference. So my fellow buddies embraced this change and really wanted to go for something different in the future. And I hope that the Westminster elite stick to that and remember that when they make their decisions. Because the many campaigning stories that we've all had and were mentioned yesterday had young men and women going to school, shaking their hands at the polling stations, congratulating us for the work we're doing. I had another young man walking through the streets who'd already been to the Parliament, shouting at one end, "Georgie boy, it's Georgie boy, let's talk to him." He was voting and he was telling me how he was voting. Matthew, who works for me, actually says, what other politician is actually treated that way in Paisley streets? I take it as a compliment myself, actually. Very good. Someone else said there's no one else called George in Paisley. But also, there was another awkward moment when a young voter came up to me from Paisley Grammar and actually said, you know, she wanted to take a selfie, and while she was taking the picture, she says, "I adore you, George." I found that quite awkward and creepy at that stage, but it just shows you how the voters, the 16 and 17-year-olds, got engaged with the whole process. They became engaged with it. We even had a situation where young women from Paisley, the Paisley girls, spoke to Ed Miliband and Douglas Alexander regarding child poverty, and they recorded it at the same time. And they were asking Mr Miliband, what about child poverty? What about all the young people? I'm voting for independence. What can you offer me and my children for the future? And he looked at her blankly, Mr Miliband did, and Douglas Alexander tried desperately to explain. And she said, "But you're paying for Trident and I can't get a house in Paisley." And this is the kind of issues and things that they were talking about. They saw independence as a way forward. We also had the Margot Mobile and Jim Stillers coming out on a number of occasions, and it was great to campaign with them again. At one stage it reminded me of my younger days in 1988 when I had Ian Lawson, Gil Patterson and Jim Stillers all campaigning in what was the modern equivalent of a snappy bus. And it was really good to be in some of these areas, because we went to areas in Foxbar like Modder Drive, which was bedecked in yes posters and everything else, because again, a low turnout area, they were desperate to see that they could see this radical change. But the sheer magnitude of the yes activists working with the SSP and the Green Party was absolutely fantastic. You know, there was one woman came up to me, and it was on the Saturday just after the campaign, and it was in my local bar, and I was on my second pint by this time, and she said, "George," she says, "can you tell Alex Salmond, the First Minister, that why did he give up? Because he was the person that convinced me, along with Nicola Sturgeon, to vote yes. So why are we at this stage to do that?" And who can forget the actual fact when we stood there in Paisley, where thousands of us walked through the streets of Paisley, and we actually had people walking through from all over the county in blue and white, saying with their yes banners, saying that they wanted a difference. They knew exactly what was happening and how important it was. But the thing we're doing locally is we're making sure that we engage with all these people that were part of that campaign. We have to keep them political. We have to make sure that they don't get fed up and they don't feel disenfranchised as the Westminster elite think it's business as usual and go back to their traditional games. Because we've almost had a situation where the Labour conference yesterday, it was almost as if, well, that didn't really happen. Let's just carry on with the Westminster's games. This isn't a game. This is people's lives we're dealing with here. And they quite clearly, whether they voted yes or no, they voted for change. And when you ask yourself what happened to the vow What happened to the actual vow? Well, let's talk about the vow. Surely it's not like a Lib Dem pledge. Surely it meant something. You know, the Scottish Parliament was meant to be a permanent and extensive new powers for the Parliament and will be delivered by the process and to a timetable agreed and announced by our three parties, starting on the 19th of September. I think that timetable is a wee bit behind, because things started changing as the morning of the 19th of September came round. Things started changing. And all I'm saying here is that Scotland demands change. My own constituency demands change. And they will be watching, along with myself, will be watching the Westminster establishment and the elite as they make these decisions over the next couple of years, because they have to do something, and this is not, Presiding Officer, business as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.